Ba-da-da-da-da-da. Dungeons and Dopamine. Ta-da!
Hi! Welcome to Dungeons and Dopamine. I'm Brie.
I'm Jess.
And this is episode 78.
Yes! Very excited when you get it right still.
Because some days it goes horribly wrong.
Every time you start it, I want to, be a menace. You said hi, and I wanted to be like, hi.
Bye.
I don't know why this is how I am as a person, and I'm so sorry. You chose to do this with me.
I also chose 30 years of friendship with you, so
Sucker.
I'm used to it.
It's fair. I mean...
Yeah.
Not much has changed.
No, we're pretty much the same people we were in 4th grade. It's fine.
It's fine. So I unlocked, I don't know if I'd call it a superpower, but for an ADHD person, it does feel like a superpower. I found that I can draw while people are talking or during D&D or even during church, which I'm sure the people at church are like, what is she doing?
She's just playing with her phone.
I can listen to every word that someone is saying and understand and focus on it if I'm drawing.
It's because I don't know if this is true. This is what I make up in my brain. It's because it engages the part of your brain that would normally be looking for other stimulation and distracting you because it's trying to find other stimulation. Instead, you're distracting. It's like distracting somebody. You're distracting that part of your brain with a shiny thing. You're like, hey, over here.
Ooh, shiny.
And the rest of your brain is like, cool, now we can do what we're supposed to.
Anyway. Yeah. I should put some more of my art on TikTok.
You should.
I made more than what I posted before. I had to cut out some content from one of our last events, I was going to say. That's my work brain. And because I cut you off in the middle of your topic to tell you and show you the caterpillar I was making because it looked like someone had blown bullet holes in it by the colors I decided to use. And then a little bit later, we laugh and you're like, yeah, it does. Then a little bit later, I'm like, look, I fixed him. And I showed him.
So sometimes it stops you from interrupting me, but not always.
Fair. I didn't during the last one, though.
That's true.
There was one time.
And I interrupted you all the time with your last one, so maybe I need to be drawing while you talk.
Have a notepad for you next time. Take notes.
Some colors, too, please.
Oh, of course, yes. I have colored pencils and markers.
Perfect.
Gel pens. Ooh. Do you know what else is super cool?
Libraries.
Yes. And the Dog Man of Michigan.
Yes.
He loves library.
He really does. He told me.
I really appreciate that you picked up on where I was going with that.
So, my last week episode was kind of somber and left off on a note about how we should eat the rich and make sure public libraries are always safe.
That was pretty awful of you.
Right? So this episode is going to be a wrap-up of libraries. Hopefully a lot more fun. Basically, I just want to tell everybody why libraries are national treasures and we should protect them.
See, now I just think that you're trying to bring up those movies again. You want to steal the Declaration of Independence with me, don't you?
This is how I needed to ask you. I can't just come out and ask you. I had to do a whole lead up.
You probably should have done one of those cameos with Nick Cage. Because as of right now, it's a no. I'm not impressed.
But if Nick Cage shows
now
up,
you know what you gotta do.
Didn't you used to adore him?
No.
Wasn't he one of
Stop
your...
it.
Fair.
Thank you for respecting my opinions.
Obviously, we have school libraries, and they tend to have slightly different rules than public libraries. Obviously, you're dealing with specific age groups, which can determine or should determine what types of information is available in these types of libraries. And then as you get into college and university libraries, there can be a lot of differences depending on what size of university or college that you're talking about. Then there are also private libraries, which could be as simple as your home library all the way up to like King Louis III's personal library at his castle or whatever. These tend to be, they're obviously self-funded or funded through private donations or private means, so these can have a lot of different rules. Obviously, you get to have the rules of your home library, and so anybody that creates their own private library gets to create their rules. Last week, we also talked about the big museum libraries, and we talked about the show The Librarians, or the movie The Librarians with Noah Weil. Again, these are the places with historical documents or significant artifacts and things that people are researching, special projects, that sort of thing. And then there's public libraries. First, did you know that there are more public libraries in the United States than there are McDonald's?
Wow. No, I did not know that.
Isn't that a fun,
that makes
happy
me
statistic?
Yeah.
But it's a statistic. So technically, yes, there are over 17,000 libraries in the United States, and there are only like 14,000 McDonald's. There's really more like 9,057 public libraries, to be very specific, from the website I found, but a lot of them have multiple locations. And then some libraries are so small, or some communities are so small, that they might only have digital lending libraries, or they might not even have a physical building. So the number gets kind of skewed, but technically, yes, there are more public libraries in the United States than there are McDonald's.
That's a fun fact. I like that.
I like that too. Public libraries obviously are publicly funded. They're usually funded through tax dollars that you probably pay on your property taxes. For instance, in my area, we actually have 2 different library branches that we pay taxes for. And most public libraries are also nonprofit organizations. So not only are they then run by boards, kind of like a previous episode when I talked about township boards, a library is going to be run the same way. There's going to be multiple members that sit on a board. They have to make all of the business decisions. They all have voting powers and things like that. Being nonprofit also means they can't make money. So they have to essentially show a balanced budget every year, showing that the money that they take in through all the different sources goes out.
I just beat up my microphone with my stylus.
Sorry, I'm so boring, okay?
Could you shut up?
I forgot where I was.
Sorry, I don't actually want you to shut up.
I have to go, okay?
Episode is going horrible.
They have to have a set of bylaws to run, so they have, how they vote, who gets voting power, how that all works. Tax funding for libraries is determined by operating millages that have to be voted on by taxpayers. The problem now with our libraries being tax funded and the voters being able to vote on this funding is, number one, the economy is what it is. People get weird about their tax money. So when you have to go back to the taxpayers and ask them to keep paying for these services, if the knowledge isn't out there about how important the library is, people will forget about it. They think that they don't need it. So there has been some fear there with the socio-political climate that we live in and book banning and all of that, that as some of these libraries' operating millages come up for renewal, there is some worry that people won't vote to approve the continued millages. So our libraries are in a little bit of danger just from that. They also, operating millages tend to be set very low because you're asking taxpayers for their money. So you try to set these millages based on the minimum amount that you could survive on. But then if anything happens down the road and you need extra money, like if you have a catastrophe and you need a new roof, the library can go back to the taxpayers and back to the voters and put like a specialty millage or a specialty bond on for vote to try to raise additional money. And those tend to be much shorter amounts of time, more like 5 or 10 years. And we're already seeing that a lot of these specialty millages don't get renewed after their first time, just because people are worried about their money. There is some scares there that as taxpayers start to like libraries less or find their information elsewhere, that we'll start to see funding decreases. So there is ways for private funding or like endowments to be donated to the library. They also obviously would be eligible for grants as nonprofit organizations, and that can be federal grants, state grants, or private grants. But to have that situation, you have to have somebody on staff that's good at writing grants or knows how to find that information, because another big problem with libraries, especially in rural, smaller areas, is we don't attract the type of employees that you would find in like the big libraries in New York City or California. We're dealing with, luckily, a very lovely lady who moved to our area 10 years ago and became the library director, and she has put her heart and soul in it, but she doesn't even have technically the required education that you need to be a library director of a library that serves a certain amount of people. Our smaller libraries not only miss out on having the staff available that knows how to write grants and has the education to bring these libraries further or improve them, but we're also working with small budgets, so the programs and the information in the books that we can get into our libraries is limited compared to places that get more tax income, or they have bigger cities, or they have just a better way to attract good talent. Not to say the talent at our local libraries isn't great. They are doing an amazing job with what they have. A lot of times they're volunteer or they're working part-time. They're probably making, $14, $15 an hour, and then we're expecting them to be able to write grants to bring in more money for these libraries. It's a vicious cycle of we don't have the resources to improve the resources that we have. Our small rural libraries can be very lackluster. They can be very low funded just because these areas don't have the funding and the people and the ability to bring a lot of money into these libraries. Now, one thing you might have noticed is when I'm talking about libraries, I keep talking about information as a whole and not just about books. And obviously the main source of information for centuries on this earth has been the printed word, or books or tablets or scrolls or whatever form that they were in. But as our technology has changed and evolved, our libraries have had to change as well, because libraries aren't just for books. They are to share information, and information as a whole, as technology has changed, has become less about books and more about all of the other ways we can access information. And I think it's incredible the way our libraries have evolved with the times, especially knowing that some of them aren't always well funded and well supported. Now I'm basically just going to go on a very long, excited list of all the things I know that our libraries offer, and therefore I know that a lot of other libraries offer them, because the other cool thing our public libraries do is they've started to work within a network. So even though we have two different library systems in Muskegon County, they work together. So if the Muskegon Library has a book that I want that my library doesn't have, I can order it through the Muskegon Library and it will be delivered to my library. With technology expanding and with all of the information we have on the internet and everywhere else, the libraries have also networked all of that together. So there's just a lot of really cool resources out there for libraries that I don't think most of us are aware of.
Yeah, I feel pretty astonished. I'm really far away. I feel pretty astonished when I learn what libraries offer. And if you aren't near us, if you're not in the Muskegon area, check out your local library, because there's some super cool things going on.
Absolutely. And even just on their websites, they're doing because it's information, they're being forced, libraries are being forced to really embrace technology as it evolves. So some of our libraries have better websites than some of the other places, much better than my township government website has, because now when you go get a degree in library science, you're not just talking about books, you're learning all about electronic information and the internet and how you bring that into a physical library, or how you use that in a library system. I will say it probably took a little bit longer for libraries to catch up to this digital age, especially in this area. They've just started really embracing it over the last probably 5 years. But I imagine that's probably different in other states or bigger cities that have more resources. They were probably on it a lot faster than we were out here in West Michigan. I also feel like part of that is as we see younger generations move into more professional settings, because right now, especially locally, a lot of our libraries are run by older generations. And so I think there was probably some hesitancy to get into the new technology, both because, well, why would we need that? We have all these books here. But how do you justify it to your taxpayers that your library needs internet when some people in your community don't even have internet at this point? Obviously, we know libraries have books, but now in the new digital age, almost all I assume all libraries, unless you're in a very rural area that doesn't have good internet, all libraries have internet. They have at least a few computers, and these can be used by patrons for, you can look up job listings, you can respond to emails, you can check your Facebook, you can look up information for a paper or research different cars that you're trying to buy. You can use these computers for whatever you need them for. But then they also will have specific computers that might be Zoom or Skype activated, and in different areas of the library that might be quieter, so that you can go in and do job interviews that are virtual, or job meetings that you have to be on Zoom for, or even to connect with your grandma that lives across the country, but you don't have good enough internet at home to be able to run Zoom. Now you can call your grandma in Colorado and be able to talk to her over Zoom because the library has that. I've seen some
She got lost in the tunnels of Denver.
She really needs you. She needs you to help lead her out. I've seen some libraries that are building basically cubicles that have a computer, and then next to it is like a pack and play or a little baby area, so that people with young children can come in and use the computer and apply for jobs or whatever they need it for, and have their baby sitting next to them in a safe spot, rather than trying to hold on to the baby and do the work and entertain the baby and all of that. Most libraries have some sort of genealogy search software and ancestry type of stuff. They have subscriptions to all those services, so you can usually sit down, sign out a computer, sign out the area, and sit down and do all of your genealogy research. Printing and copying services, whether you go in with a piece of paper that you need to make a copy of, or I've seen some of them that you can do it electronically. You can just send your PDF or whatever to this specific email address, and they will print it out for you, and you just have to go pick it. You just walk to the front desk and say, hey, I'm here to pick up my documents. A lot of these are free, or maybe a very small charge, or a lot of libraries will base it, you get 25 free copies a year, and then after that you have to pay 5 cents a page or something along those lines. There are always, depending on the space and the size, there are usually meeting rooms, whether it's the meeting room where the board meets or rooms that can be rented out. As I talked last week, if they do have these spaces available, they do have to make them available for everyone for any reason, to cover any topic that they want, which I think is awesome. They usually also have, along with books, they have different newspapers, magazines. Now they also have digital copies of all of those newspapers and magazines. So if you're really into the New York Times, you can get a copy of it at your local library.
Which is nice, because otherwise you have to subscribe to it.
Yeah, and it's expensive. And the library's already paying for that, so you might as well go do it there. Most libraries have physical copies of like DVDs and CDs and music now. It's not just books that you can rent or borrow. You can borrow DVDs. Our library, and I know the Muskegon Library too, has a library of things. And this lets you check out different objects that you might need, like a metal detector, or the thing you can plug into your car to see what codes it's got when your check engine light is on. Different musical instruments, yard games, board games. Our Muskegon area library, which is really a huge network of a library if you look at it. We have a library for the visually and physically disabled. Their library of things has things like glasses, colorblind glasses. Oh. So you can see different colors. They've got children's colorblind glasses. They've got different reading activities. This looks like knitting stuff. Yeah, crochet hooks. A hammock. Ooh. Jenga, karaoke system. They've got kites, just a whole random list of things you can go in and actually rent from the library. They also, now that we are getting into the digital age, they have all kinds of access to, whether you're doing audiobooks or electronic books or anything along those lines. There's a variety of different apps that you can download. You sign in with your library card, and then you can actually borrow these electronic books. And they work the same as a library. They only get so many licenses per library. So you might still have to, put it on hold and wait for it to be available. But they sync right with whatever app you use to read on your phone, or if you have a Kindle, you can sync it to that, so you can actually...
Hoopla.
Yeah.
One of them that I have on my
Hoopla
phone.
and Libby is another big one. They have audiobooks too, so it's not just the ebooks, but you can find audiobooks.
And audiobooks are super expensive.
Yes, they are. They're like $27 or more. And even if you're on Audible, you're paying at least $15 a month for credits. So you could be getting it free at your library. And again, these are all, especially since they're digital and since they're electronic apps and websites, these are all connected like countrywide with all these different libraries. So even if your library doesn't have a license for it, there's probably an option for them to borrow the license from a different local library and make sure that you have access that way. Our library, and I'm assuming other libraries, also have like children activity kits, so Magnetiles or Lincoln Logs. They also put together backpacks that you can take out that have like reading books to help a kid learn to read, or like an activity board that's about tying your shoes, and it has books in the backpack that are about tying your shoes, or math games, or different types of interests that way. Most libraries offer different types of community events or get-togethers. I know our library, there's always like baby time classes during the week and family classes or family days where you can come in and the children's director will read stories to the whole family.
I've seen crafts that they do. They'll
Yes.
set up a craft table, and one of them that I saw last year had a princess come and do the crafts with the children.
We went to one at our library where the new children's programming person, she's really into Avatar, like
Oh, fun.
not the blue people, but the
anime. Yep.
And she had a whole afternoon where I brought Connor in, and she had all these different activities for Airbender. And, she went through all the cool moves you could do to be a fire person or whatever, all the elements. And she had different stations set up and crafts that you could do. Just all these types of activities. On Friday afternoons, because our local school district lets the kids out early, the library actually does like a teen hangout for an hour and a half where they play video games and they just kind of talk and hang out. They also started offering Switch games in the library. So they had, I don't know, maybe 20 different titles that were donated, and people can come in and actually borrow the Switch games for a week. They have all kinds of different like special interest groups, not just book clubs, but like our library has a cookbook club or a grandmother's club where it's just grandmothers in the area that get together once a month and just talk about being grandmothers. There's always classes going on. Most libraries now have book club in a bag. So you check out a large tote bag and it has like 8 to 10 copies of one book and then discussion questions, so you can hand them out to your whole book club and then already have the pre-made discussion questions. A lot will offer exercise classes, whether it's yoga or like easy stretch or something along those lines. And most are often built nowadays in areas that, obviously not in the big cities, but especially around here, that are near like walking trails or nature areas, and they'll kind of connect that. Most libraries now, even as part of like the library of things that I talked about, but they will offer technology. So if you don't have internet at home, you can actually check out Wi-Fi hotspots from our library and bring it home for a week and have Wi-Fi at home. Tablets and laptops and different types of technology that you might need at home. Through a grant process, which I assume is pretty widespread, our library was able to buy 2 picnic tables that have Wi-Fi attached to them and are run on solar power.
Oh, wow.
So they charge outside and you just sit at the picnic table and you have Wi-Fi while you sit there. So especially in our area, there are homes that don't have good internet. They can just go to the library and be hooked up to the internet while they sit outside at a picnic table. We also have library lockers, which can be put basically anywhere in the community that is maybe a distance from the library, and people that can get to the township hall can get online and reserve a book, and the library will come deliver it to a locker in the library lockers at the township hall, and somebody that lives next door can come pick their book up from there or return their book there rather than going all the way to the library. We still have bookmobiles. They recently made a comeback. They saved my life as a child. That was my only access to books when I was on summer vacation, because I didn't live in a place where I had an easy access to the library, and I didn't have a mom that was going to drive me to the library once a week. But I had a bookmobile that showed up every 2 weeks. I've also seen a cute little mobile book bicycle, like the old,
sure,
like they used to keep ice cream in the coolers and ride around with a bicycle. They put books in it and go to campgrounds or mobile home communities, somewhere where all the houses are really close together and they can deliver books that way. Our library, completely unbeknownst to me, is already discussing turning this quiet study room that's mostly unused into a podcast or recording room. And
competition.
Or maybe we'll go record there.
There.
Or we'll donate some money and they can make it the Dungeons and Dopamine podcast room. But I also saw, I guess Muskegon Library already does this. They already have one. If you're a part of a library, or if you have a library card, you also have access, at least in Michigan, to the Michigan Online Educational Library, which is fully online. I've used it to find practice tests for my state licensing. They had real estate broker practice tests on there. They had registered medical assistant tests on there back in the day. And these are actual, not copies of the tests that you take through the state, but really good study guides for the tests that you take through the state. They also, a lot of our local libraries have maker spaces where kids or adults can come in and basically do crafts, and they'll keep different craft activities. But a lot of them, with the right funding, will also have a 3D printer or a plasma cutter, or a Cricut to make t-shirt decals. And a lot of times you can find free tax forms or government forms will be easily found at the library. They'll have a table for them or whatever during tax time. A lot of libraries have seed libraries now, so you can bring in seeds from your garden and share them with your neighbors and get seeds from other people. Obviously, they have community events, they have book sales, they're always involved in any of the community events. And that's literally the surface of it. If you dive into these websites and you just get on your local library's website, it's incredible to me how much they can offer. Streaming services. There's new technology now that our library just signed up for, where they pay a certain amount of money per year, and then everybody with a library card has access to this particular streaming service with a bunch of free kids educational shows and things along those lines. It's all there. It's incredible the amount of resources they have with not a lot of money and not always a lot of support, because again, the people that are going to the library
usually can't afford to support them.
Exactly. If you're at the library, it's usually either it's because you love libraries like me, or it's because you need to be there. You need the free services. You can't go out and buy your kid a new book every week, and you can't keep buying them new movies, or you don't have all these streaming services. It's easy for the richer people, the more comfortable people to say, oh, well, why does our library need that? Why does our library need all this money? But we need to remind people that not everybody has money to even go out and buy new books. But these libraries are there publicly for public access to allow every member of our community whatever resources they need. And they are doing a really good job at covering all the resources that are needed.
I love it.
Yay!
I don't have a good, mostly because I couldn't find my notes right away. I don't have a good transition because I can't remember exactly where you kind of left off.
Save the libraries!
Yay! So, libraries, books, Voynich manuscript. Don't you hate how you can't figure out what happened and why the Voynich manuscript exists?
I think about it all the time.
Well, let me add something else for you to think about.
Great.
This is probably going to end up being a two-parter. It wasn't supposed to be. And then I made 20 pages of notes.
So this is a 3-hour-long Dungeons and Dopamine.
Here we go. This story takes place in 1978. Our main players are 5 men. They were all, nowadays when you research them, they're all labeled with intellectual disabilities. They were known as the boys. They were aged to be called men, but as a collective, everyone just called them the boys. So I'm not trying to look down on them or make them seem smaller or younger or
Those young boys.
those babies. And this story is called the Yuba County 5, if you are so inclined to look up more about it. So the boys, there were 5 of them. They were known as, They were known as No, they weren't known as anything. Their names were Ted Weir, Jack Hewitt, Bill Sterling, Jack Madruga, and Gary Mathias.
I know this one, I think.
Do you?
Yes. I'm excited now.
There's so much to this.
Don't ask me why Matthias is the name that I'm like, I know this one.
I think I know why. Gary Mathias was diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. Jack Madruga, skip that. Ted Weir was he was described as really sweet, but kind of slow and over-trusting. These are very clearly sort of their mental states. I'll say that. I want everyone to keep in mind that these men were, this happened in the 70s, so these men would have been in the 50s when they were diagnosed. I'm going to put quotation marks around diagnosed. Just want you to remember how far we've come now in 70 years with mental health. Mm-hmm. Keep that in mind this whole story. Jack Madruga was a very shy guy. Mario. Bill Sterling, some people said he just was lazy, but never disabled. And then Jackie Hewitt was truly diagnosed with a mental disability. He was illiterate and had a hard time forming a full sentence. His mom said she expected his IQ would be around 40. So, okay. But I don't want to get ahead of myself. Just overall, some people think that maybe these boys were just, maybe like Jack, maybe just shy. Maybe he had a hard time speaking out at school, and so he was labeled as troubled or slow or, all of the fun, unsavory terms they loved to use back then. Friends and family would go on to describe the boys. Ted, they said he was a gentle giant. He was about 200 pounds. He was a big guy. He was really, really sweet. He would wave at strangers, and if they didn't wave back, he would spend time being really disappointed and thinking that he did something wrong.
Oh.
The other boys were all described as active, and they were all friends who liked to spend time together. Jack Madruga was 30 years old. He was quiet, introverted, but incredibly smart. I almost wonder if he was autistic. So, but I'm just putting labels on this. That's just my theory, not actually anything real. He ended up serving in Vietnam, and he loved his car. It was his pride and joy. That's a note. Put a little check mark in that.
Loved his car. Got it.
Bill Sterling was 29 years old. He was an avid bowler. He was also considered very athletic and known for being really sweet and studious. And he would actually go to the mentally ill patients and read Bible passages to them. Then there's Gary Mathias. He was 25 years old. He was really athletic. He was a really great brother. He was a musician and played in a rock band in high school. He also played harmonica and apparently was really good at it. And he also spent time in the military. And then there was Jackie. He was 24 years old. He was a really good friend and a really loving person. He was just really sweet, but he hated making phone calls. Now,
same.
Yes, right? Right there with you, my friend. One thing I want to point out is that one of the sources I found said that Ted was the one who was much slower. And then more of the sources I found said Jackie was. So I should have probably just fact checked it, but I'm a busy girl.
I had things to do.
Which just is a note, keep in mind, I'm getting all of this offline, which is obviously all the truth and completely correct.
Obviously.
The boys obviously met in the 70s. They played on a Yuba County nonprofit basketball team, and it was specifically to help men, women, I don't know if they let women in. Let me rephrase that. It was specifically to let at least men with disabilities learn. The whole facility was set up that they could learn to do things that would allow them to go out and get jobs. And occasionally they would earn money by doing some of these things. But it also was sort of like the why. And they had programs like basketball and stuff like that. On February 25th of that year, they were supposed to play together in a big game. They were doing really well and had a good chance that they could win. Their team was the something Gators. It's a really cute name, but I cannot remember it right now. But it's down in my notes somewhere. It just seems like it belongs here. Which means
Gators.
I probably put them somewhere wrong. It's just going to be in the middle of something horrible.
Like mine was.
Yeah, exactly. So the day before they were supposed to play in this basketball game, they went to go watch another basketball game. It was from what I can tell, it was a college basketball game. It was UC Davis, who they all avidly followed and really enjoyed. So on February 24th of 1978, they piled into Madruga's car, Jack's car. He's the one who just loves his car. Mm-hmm. And headed out of town to watch a game. The route it took them to get to the game was a straight line with one single turn. Wasn't anything overly complicated. Witnesses said they saw the boys at the game. They noticed them specifically because they kind of kept to themselves and sat together, and there was something kind of distinctive about them. That was a quote, something very distinctive about them. They don't elaborate on it. I don't know if it's because they, with mental disabilities, especially in the 70s, you were just labeled as weird.
Right.
We would have been so burned at the stake.
Absolutely.
So after the game, the boys stopped at a market and they bought candy and cakes and milk. And then one report said Pepsi's as well. I don't know if that one's right.
That one's a liar. They
lied about the Pepsi's. This is all false.
It's all fact.
This was the last absolutely confirmed place the boys would ever be seen. From that point on, we don't know what happened to them. The boys vanished without a trace, and the next day their families reported them missing. Some of them had stayed up all night because they were concerned. They did call each other to see if the boys had decided to stay the night somewhere. And the strange thing about this is that if it was a bigger town, they probably would have been shrugged off, and it would have been like, these are grown men, just relax. But
quit being so overprotective.
Exactly, let your kid grow up. But because this town was really small and all of these people knew the boys, the police took it very seriously. One of the police officers was even someone who went to school with some of them, so he knew that this could end up being a very dire situation. They also knew that the boys would not miss this big game. They had a real chance to win, and the prize was tickets to Disneyland. They had big plans to do this. Eventually, Jack Madruga's car was found in the snow. I want to say it was about 3 or 4 days after they disappeared because it was a very snowy, icky area. They found it on the side of the road about 70 miles in the wrong direction from home. Jack had been in the military and had some of that sort of, what would you call, military precision about taking care of his car. He was really particular about it. And when they found the car...
And he loved this car.
He loved this car. It was his pride and joy. He wouldn't even drive it sometimes down roads that were too bumpy because he didn't want it to hurt his car. One of his buddies lived down the road and he wouldn't drop him off there. So
you have to walk from here.
Exactly. So when they found the car, they knew that there was something funny about it because his passenger side window was down and it was snowing, and he would have never let that happen. They did find the wrappers and leftovers of the snacks that they had purchased, but there was no sign of the boys. There were a few maps in the car from one of the sites that I found, but Jack was also kind of a map enthusiast. He liked to study them, and so it really didn't make anybody believe that they had planned to take this trip or this detour. He naturally would have had maps in his car. So suddenly a big search was happening. They brought in some snow equipment, like snowmobiles and things that could cross over the snow, and they started looking for the guys. They did this for a few days until a huge storm blew in. They tried to continue, but one of the volunteers ended up getting frostbite. And so it was pretty severe.
It was pretty yucky out.
Yeah, so they had to stop. Now, they did go back to searching on and off for 3.5 months. No sign of the guys. Until motorcyclists were off-roading in the woods, and they went by some outbuildings that were used by fire crews during fire season. They saw a broken window and decided to investigate. What's going on? This is weird. And they found a dead body in a lot of places called it a trailer. So I don't know if these were mobile outbuildings or what they were exactly. I'm going to probably end up calling it the trailer or the camper because it's just what came into my mind. So maybe I'm rechanging the story a little bit. But they found this dead body. And it was Ted Weir's body. He was lying in the bed and he was wrapped up like a mummy, but very carefully, like someone was actually taking care of him. Even his head, but not his face, was wrapped. Like they were really trying to keep him warm. He was in a later stage of decomposition, so he had been there for a while. Despite that, they could tell that he had really severe issues on his feet with frostbite. He had lost 5 toes total, and his foot was gangrenous. They also said that he had lost an excessive amount of weight. Ted was 200 pounds when he had gone missing, approximately, and they figure he was 80 to 100 pounds when they found him. Not just from the decomp, but when he had passed away. Like, duh.
Just skin and bones.
They believe that he lived in the trailer. Actually stayed and lived and thrived there for anywhere from 2 months to 3.5 months. So very scary. The way he was wrapped up, he could not have done that himself. Mm-hmm. So it was fairly clear that someone was taking care of him. They found Gary Mathias's shoes in the trailer, and Ted's boots were missing. So maybe a switch happened, who knows. But if they'd walked to this camper, they walked 19 miles. The other weird thing is that they would have had to walk past a lodge that had people in it, which is really strange. They did rule Ted's cause of death as starvation. So really sad. But the really weird thing is that in these outbuildings, these fire buildings, there was a food locker and canned food within the trailer, and there was enough to feed Ted and all the boys for months. Some reports I heard said that some of the food was opened with a military can opener. So there's no explanation why he would die of starvation.
Right.
It just doesn't make sense. Now, they also did say that if he had been left there at any point, he would not have been able to walk because of the stages of how bad his feet were.
Okay.
So there was also a propane heater in the trailer that had never been lit. They theorized that maybe none of the boys knew that you had to turn the propane on to get it to light, and they tried, but Gary Mathias was in the military and should have known that you had to do that, or anyone with a propane grill. I don't think that was a unheard of. It would have been much more common
back then. Yeah,
it was almost the 80s. I mean, it feels like it wasn't a brand new idea.
And like, we don't use them as much nowadays because we have like electric stoves and all that, but back then it was normal. The way to cook.
And if you camped or anything, that was very common. And in the military, I think of like butane lighters and like the cans that you need to use to make fire.
Right.
So I want to remind you really briefly of our timeline at this point. The boys went missing on February 24th. Ted was found on June 4th. Bill Sterling was found next on June 5th with Jack Madruga's body. These two were found on the side of a road about 5 miles from where the car was found. And then finally, Jackie Hewitt's body was found on June 7th in a wooded area about a mile away from Ted's body, about a mile away from the trailer. The biggest sad part about this is that in many reports that I read, it was actually his father who found him. And one of the reports I read, trigger warning or content warning, said that he found his coat and went to it and picked it up, and his son's spine fell out of it. So, really disturbing stuff. Some of the bodies had been disturbed by animals. And so that's 4 of our boys. The 5th boy, Gary Mathias, was never found. We don't know where he was. All right. I feel like this might have been a little short, but this is a really perfect place to stop to continue telling you guys the rest of the story.
Well, and since I went way over with my library
since Bree
excitement,
decided this was her episode.
All I remember about that story is that they were so close to that lodge.
Yes.
Like,
they had to walk past it.
Yeah. And that the trailer was full of food. Like, how did they not survive? How did they miss that lodge and
by
have
all
that
accounts,
food?
They truly were not so mentally disabled that they wouldn't have been able to do this. One person I read said, or one article I read said that the car was stuck in the snow. But these were 5 very athletic boys. They all played basketball. They bowled. They were, by all accounts, real active. Mm-hmm. They were, 2 of them had been in the military. You'd think they'd be able to get it out.
Yeah.
It's what I read said that one strong man would have been able to push the car out, or a man sitting on the trunk would have put enough pressure down that they could have backed the car out. Mm-hmm. And I think that they would have been able to figure that out.
Right.
There's a lot of speculation. Some of the ridiculous and fun ones are Yetis, aliens. I mean, fill in the usual story that I end with, like fill in the normals. Wolfman. Dogman, sorry.
I was like, who's Wolfman?
He's in California.
Well, then he's not good enough.
He's not it. So that is where I'm going to leave you guys off. I will tell you some of this case gets even stranger, and I will tell you some of that next week. And I will tell you some of the theories about what happened. Spoiler alert, we don't know.
That's so
There's
crazy.
There's nothing that tells us what happened during this. It's about 50 years later, and we're still completely perplexed by this.
And by now, well, no, I guess Mathias, if he did survive it, he might still be alive.
He was 25 in 1978, so he'd been in his 70s, 80s now. Yeah. His brother is about 80. So yeah, there's some stuff. Mm-hmm. I will get into some of Gary's past and some of the things we know about him. And a lot of what I saw was a lot of interesting theories. There's some books out there that I'd love to read about this. I really wanted to get more information for you guys, but I already had 20 pages of notes and figured this shouldn't probably be a 4-part miniseries. Although Bree did a 4-part miniseries about libraries.
Right, all in one episode, too. 2 episodes. 2 episodes.
2. Get it together.
And next week, I'm apparently talking about
haunted libraries.
So I was like, what am I talking about?
I got you.
Thank you.
And then after that, you're going to talk about Carnegie.
Yeah. See?
I got your topics.
I bet Carnegie's a good two-parter at least.
Probably. I love it when my things turn into 2 parts because I do all the research and then I don't have to think about another topic.
Especially, like, I was getting a little nervous about this week and I was like, okay, libraries, I should be able to do that one pretty quick, and then I have to pick another topic. And no, I didn't.
You did not. You could have done 3 library weeks.
Apparently, I could have.
You are, technically.
Yeah.
But you're going, like, Jessica Library.
I mean, you got to do that every once in a while.
Then we'll have to go to the Hagley Library sometime, and maybe we could talk to them.
Yeah.
We could follow them on
Facebook. They should be doing those creepy tours right now.
They should be. I was going to go to a haunted art show, but I got distracted and didn't.
That's usually how it goes for me, too.
Okay, so let's end this episode so I don't have to edit for 6 hours.
Right. I have an app for that. Don't know where it is, but I have one. On that note, This was Dungeons and Dopamine Podcast.
You can listen You can listen to us anywhere you stream podcasts and on YouTube.
You can support us on Patreon at www.patreon.com/dungeonsdopamine.
You can find us on Facebook, TikTok, Twitter, Insta, and Reddit.
You can also reach out to us on any of those social medias or at dungeonsdopamine@yahoo.com.
Dungeons and Dopamine is edited and published by Argyle Pigeon Productions.
This might be one of our top outros ever.
Yeah, I mean, that was pretty slick. Although I really like my angry pigeon outro, so.
That one was kind of fantastic.
All right.
All
We
right.
love you guys. Thanks.
Okay, thanks. Bye.
Bye.